Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Political Science 101 American Government and Politics at Simmons College. Thank you all for commenting on the previous video that you watched it. I know most of you have, either one way or another, indicated to me that you saw it. And the video has enough views to make me think that even more of you have seen it than commented on it. So please don't forget to comment below the video that you've watched it, and that you're present as we can be, and that's how you'll get your credit for attendance. And any questions or comments you have on the videos, that's how you're going to get your participation grade this semester. So with that, we have a quiz coming up. It's not too close, still almost 2 weeks away. It's Monday after next, and I'll talk more about that closer to time. But suffice it to say, it'll cover a lot of the material we talked about so far, but I also promise you that it won't be that difficult. Well, let me say I won't intentionally make it difficult. If you had difficulty with it when the time comes, that's fine. We'll talk through it, and it's just it's an important part of your grade, but it's not so much that you're going to fail or anything if you don't do well. So next week I'll start talking about the quiz, give you an idea of what to expect on that, and I'll let you know which parts of the lectures so far you may want to go back and revisit. Which parts of the textbook may want to go back and revisit. If you don't have a textbook yet, don't forget to try to obtain those. I would contact Keisha Barger at Simmons College and see if they still have any copies at the college. I also know at least a couple of you all have let me know that you found used copies online that are older editions, and that's fine. The older editions may not have page numbers that match up with the ones in the syllabus supplement, but that's okay, because if you have any, you should be able to look at the index or the table of contents and figure out where the different type of content is in the book. And if you have trouble with that, just reach out to me. Text me, email me, and let me know you're having trouble with that, and I'll reach out to you, and we'll take care of that. We'll make sure that you and I are on the same page. So again, thank you all for commenting in the last video. Don't forget to comment on this one. Before I get into the topic at hand today, which is different types of laws and the power that those laws carry in this country. Before I get into that, I want to address a couple of comments you all said. One was from an older video, a couple of videos back, I believe, where one of you reached out to me and said something. I'll paraphrase, but it was something to the effect of, "Wow, the United States really has an ugly history with black people, or with African descendants of slaves." And that's true. I mean, I don't think that person was asking the question so much as making a comment based on one of my previous lectures, and I couldn't agree more. This class is not about current events necessarily, but everything happening in this country today is rooted in our history and our political system. When I say that, I'm talking about the way this country was founded and the way our economy was built early on. The country was founded as a representative government, and although maybe not exactly the founders and the intentions of the people who founded this country, we certainly ended up with a what we now call a capitalist system, economic system, with a mostly free market, where the goal to obtain security as far as civil liberties and security to live your life as you please, for a lot of people is tied directly towards financial independence, towards financial success, towards the ability to buy with money or with other goods the things that you want for you and your family, and in some cases your community. I'm not here today to talk about whether capitalism is good or bad. It certainly has good and bad attributes, but what I can tell you is that when it is unrestrained in any way, it leads to a ruling class of people who are motivated only by their own financial bottom lines. When that happens, People will often employ questionable means to make as much money as possible. Now, that's true no matter where you are in the world and what part of history you're talking about. But history itself is full of human beings who make one amoral, unethical, logically ridiculous assumption, and then take that assumption and run wild and use that assumption to build more and more and more faulty assumptions upon it. In the case of American history, the basic assumption from many of the people who started this country, not just the wealthy, landowning white men who were part of the Constitutional Convention and wrote the Constitution and made up the first several Congresses of the United States, as well as the first several presidents of the United States. But also people who were white, but not as wealthy, not landowning, not necessarily slave owning, but as a whole, the ruling class in the early days of this country, at least in the southern states, operated under the assumption that Africans and people of African descent were not equal to white people. Now, that's not going to come as any revelation to any of y'all. I didn't just open your minds. Anyway, you already know that, because so many people in this country today still feel that way. But back then, these people didn't hide. They didn't hide behind their keyboards and their smartphones on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They were beyond open about it. These people either owned slaves or they condoned the wealthy people in their community owning slaves. Slaves were human beings, but there was some disagreement about that. Again, whether or not people of African descent were human beings. What a ridiculous thing to argue about. Of course they're human beings. I know that, and hopefully all of you know that. But when you allow an economic system to develop under the assumption that the ruling class is a superior type of human being or even a superior species, then you end up with the type of situation we had in the early days of this country, where the southern economy, the states that produced a lot of the raw materials that drove the manufacturing into the northern economy, the southern states and their economic products, their agricultural products, without which the early economy of the United States would not have flourished. They operated on that assumption that you can make somebody work a job like an animal if you think of that somebody as an animal, because so many early Americans, white Americans, lacked the understanding that a person with black skin or a person with brown skin is somebody, is a person, just like me and my white wife and my white daughter. Anyone who's not white, who is a human being, is a person. Again, I know that, you know that, but some of the people who founded this country didn't get that. And there was a lot of disagreement about that. And a lot of the people up north, including white people up north, quite a few of them, they got that. Even back in the day, the 1700s, the 1800s, they understood that. And they fought for it. They didn't fight for it alone. As Dave Chappelle said, black people darn near freed themselves. And what he meant by that was, it was referring to the fact that 1 out of every 8 Union soldiers by the end of the American Civil War was black. That war is not won without black troops fighting for their own freedom and the freedom of fellow people of African descent. All right, I'm going to get down off my soapbox for a minute and talk a little bit more about the topic of class today, but we'll revisit this later in class. This is a class where I could just talk about the Constitution and the structure of government, but I don't think I'm doing my job unless I really get into American history a little bit. And since one of you reached out to me and made that comment about the ugly history, the ugly, horrible past of the United States with people of African descent, then I'm going to talk about it. It's important, and it shapes our government and politics today. If you don't believe me, ask yourself this. How many people in this country who are black people of African descent, African descendants of slaves, are qualified to be president of the United States? The Constitution says you must be at least 35 years of age and you must be a natural-born American citizen. Millions of black people fit that definition. But of those millions, how many do you think would be a good president? Certainly better than some presidents. I'd say that answer is, I don't know the number, but it's pretty darn high. I personally know a lot of black people, male and female, who could be darn good presidents. We've only had one president who wasn't white. And we still have not had a president who was an African descendant of slaves, despite the fact that millions of Americans fit that definition. The history of this country influences the politics of today. Never forget that. All right. One of you also reached out and asked, talked about that, mentioned the how laws affect all of us, but it seems like they only affect the wealthy. Wealthy people, and I believe you said, your classmate said the president and wealthy people can do whatever they want. There's some truth to that, and we'll talk about it later on in class. The one thing I can tell you for sure is that if a wealthy man, let's say a billionaire, walks out into 4th Street Live, downtown Louisville, and shoots somebody in the face with witnesses, and a poor person with severe mental illness and an addiction to, let's say, heroin, does the same thing, and both of them are charged with murder, and there's dozens of witnesses, I think you and I both know that that trial is going to go very differently for those two different defendants in court. We'll talk more about that later in class, later this semester. For today, I'll talk a little more about the hierarchy of laws, because I've talked about the three branches of federal government. And the federal government is the national government. It's the one based in Washington, D.C. that oversees the whole nation. And it works in tandem with state and local governments. We'll talk about those things next week. But the national government, federal government of the United States, has three branches. As we said, they are legislative, executive, and judicial. Those three branches all make their own types of laws. There's a hierarchy of laws. At the very top of that hierarchy is the United States Constitution. After that comes statutes. Statutes are passed by the House and Senate, then either signed into law by the president or vetoed by the president, at which point Congress has the chance to override that veto. Statutes are the second most powerful type of federal law. After that, it gets a little more complicated. The president, the head of the executive branch, can issue something called an executive order. That is just the president making a statement and publicizing it. That's all that is. A statement of law. The executive branch also has agencies. You've heard of some of these agencies, like the Department of Justice, or the Department of Homeland Security, or the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or the Department of Education. Those are just some examples. There are many more. Those agencies can all make their own rules, what lawyers call promulgate. They can promulgate their own rules. So that's two ways the executive branch can make laws. I also talked about the judicial branch. The judicial branch, they have opinions. Courts issue opinions, and those opinions are a type of law. Well, why so many kinds of laws? Simple. The Constitution did not address all the many, many details necessary to govern this great big country. So, statutes clarify some things, and they expound upon some things in the Constitution. But each time a statute is passed, as I told you all in the last lecture, the federal courts have a chance to determine whether or not those statutes violate the Constitution. If they do not violate the Constitution, then okay, they could just stay law, and they can be law. They are a very significant type of law, the second most powerful type of law. All right, that's statutes. I mentioned executive orders and administrative regulations. Those types of laws, made by the executive branch, must not violate the Constitution, which y'all should already have guessed that one. They also must not violate statutes. So if an executive order by the president or a administrative regulation made by some government agency is in violation of a statute or the Constitution, the federal courts have the power to strike those down and say, nope, your executive order, Mr. President, is not valid because it violates a statute or it violates the Constitution. An example of this would be some of President Donald Trump's executive orders early in his term of office, which had to do with immigration from nations that are predominantly Muslim. And the court said, no, that violates many parts of the Constitution, including one very important part, the 14th Amendment, which we'll talk about later on in the semester. It's a very important part. If you want to skip way ahead, and I doubt this is the case, but if you all have nothing else to do, then you have time on your hands, then read the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. It won't be on your first quiz, but it will be on later quizzes, and it will be on the final exam. So, what about judicial opinions? A little more complicated, but the main thing to know about the judicial opinions when it comes to the hierarchy of the power of federal laws is that if that opinion is interpreting the Constitution, then it is the law. That is the official legal interpretation of the Constitution. And other statutes and executive orders and administrative regulations must not violate what that judicial opinion says about the Constitution. Okay, y'all. I think my video is frozen again, and I apologize, but if the audio is still rolling, you got what you need to know. Please continue to follow along the syllabus supplement. There are reading assignments in that document. That document is under, I believe, the syllabus tab in Canvas for this class. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know, and do not forget to comment below this video, letting me know that you watched it. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you and your families are doing well, and I will talk to y'all on Monday. I need to check and see if we're off for the holiday or not, but either way, I'll be talking to y'all next week. Thank you so much.